Hey, this is Joe from Home Studio Corner. Today, good versus bad vocal mixes. You asked for it. Here we go. I've put together a bunch of bad sounding vocal mixes, all using the same vocals so we can hear kind of the wide variety of differences you can get, even if we're all mixing the same thing. Now, this is my subjective opinion on what makes a good vocal and a bad vocal. These are all mistakes that I've made and mistakes that I hear people making all the time. So hopefully we can help you not make some of these mistakes at least. All right, let's dive into the first one. One of the easiest mistakes to mix is just having the vocal at the wrong volume. I'm going to play this intro and then the vocal will come in for the verse, and listen to how you're familiar with the volume of the music as the music is playing, and when the vocal comes in, you want to reach for the volume to change it because the vocal's just not in line with the music.
You are so much more.
Okay, just far too loud for the music. Even though the tone of the vocal might sound good, it's just too loud. Or on the other side,
You are so much more.
I've done lots of critiques over the years. I've heard both versions of these quite a bit. And the problem is, if you get the vocal just too low or too loud in the mix, your ears can accommodate to it, and then you spend all your time trying to use compression and EQ to get it to fit in the right volume space in the mix, when the actual solution was to just adjust the volume. One trick to do this: turn your speakers down to a low volume and adjust your level there. The vocal in general should sit right around the volume of the kick drum and the snare drum, maybe a little bit more. But if the vocal is way louder than everything else, most of the time that's too loud. There are rare occasions where you can pull that off, but if you're listening to the song with fresh ears and you want to reach for your speaker volume when the vocal comes in, like you're like, gotta turn that down, or ooh, need to turn that up, then the vocal volume's wrong. Up next is everyone's favorite, the muddy vocal. The goal is to make it warm and full and big, but the result is mud.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
Can you hear that? There's that woo. Those frequencies are just built up too much. And sometimes that's just a natural process of the voice. If you leave that in, it sounds muddy. Ironically, you need to thin the vocal out to get it to sound warm in the mix. If you do that, it'll sound like this. It's still warm, but it sits just right on top of the mix.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
Let things like the kick drum and the bass carry a lot of the warmth. The vocal doesn't have to. All right, up next, honky vocals. It can happen when you get too much mid-range in there. Here's what that sounds like.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
All this has is added mid-range, like in the 500 to 1000 hertz range, but it makes the vocal sound lo-fi. You're now not getting the low end and not getting the top end. You're getting all this middle range frequencies, and it makes it sound like a telephone effect. Telephone effect is, don't do the telephone effect. It's too honky. Like a car horn. Foghorn. Now, maybe you've got a muddy vocal, and to combat it, you think, I'll just add some high frequencies to brighten it up. Well, might work, but don't make it sound like this.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
Now, that's obviously too bright, but if we go back to the final mix, the actual mixed vocal for this, it now sounds a little dark because we just heard a ridiculously bright vocal.
You are so much more.
And that's a perfect example of how if you mix things badly, your ears will get used to it quickly and it'll sound normal to you, while when the rest of us listen to your mix for the first time, we go like that because there's so much high frequencies on the vocal, you don't even hear it anymore. You've gone ear blind to them. Deaf. Now here's a little more of an advanced problem. If you use compression on your vocals, which you probably do, you might notice one of the byproducts is the sibilance of the vocal gets too loud. The S's and T's jump out. So you might reach for a de-esser to turn those down. Very normal. Problem is, people get a little too happy with their de-essers, and instead of taming the S's, they almost get rid of them to the point where the singer sounds like he or she has a lisp. Here's what that sounds like.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
You are so much more. Now, some people have lisps, and that's fine. If the vocalist doesn't have a lisp and you remove all the S's with the de-esser, we suddenly can't understand what the person is saying, right? So we don't want to do that. All right, here's another very common one. Too much reverb and having a bad sounding reverb to where it sounds literally like the vocalist is singing in a public bathroom. I'm not sure how this happens, but it happens a lot, and it's not that attractive. Take a listen.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
I mean, I guess you could make the argument it has a certain sort of vibe, but to me it sounds like when I'm in a public bathroom by myself, I'm usually humming or singing something. Don't want that recorded. Here's the way I like to use reverb a lot of times on a vocal like this. It's a very big, long tail reverb, but just a little bit.
You are so much more.
So you hear that? It's just like almost a pad underneath everything. Less is a lot of times more. And finally, one of the easiest ones to do, overcompress. Holy compression, Batman. We don't want to overcompress vocals. We can heavily compress vocals. I generally do add quite a bit of compression to vocals, but there is definitely a point where you've gone too far and it just sounds super effective. Generally, we want to hear a great sounding vocal. We don't want to hear the compression in a super obvious way. Here's what that sounds like.
You are so much more than words upon the screen.
So how do you tell that it's overcompressed? Well, things like the breath becomes the loudest sound that you hear, and the little quiet parts in between phrases are suddenly super loud because you've compressed every single piece of volume so incredibly much that it's all just mushed together, and so the breathiness is just as loud as when I scream the vocal. That's too much. Yes, we want compression. No, we don't want too much. This is what sounds about right to me when it comes to the overall mix and compression.
You are so much more.
It hits that so much with a little squish, doesn't hit the quieter parts very much. Especially for a song like this, that feels just about right. Okay, I think that was 7 examples of bad sounding vocals. What other examples do you have? Leave them in the comments below. Leave your questions. What else do you want me to cover on this channel? I need to hear from you. Leave me some feedback. And if you haven't checked out my 5-step mix guide and you feel like your mixes are just a big mass of chaos and you don't know what you're doing or what to do next, I can help. Check it out. It's free. Go to 5stepmix.com. Thanks for watching. See ya.